My favorite thing about being a crossing guard is that I get to interact with the kids and the parents, and they're so happy if I can make their day by saying good morning. As an ex-nurse, I love being the crossing guard.
All right, all clear, you can go cross.
I became a crossing guard to make sure that the kids got to school safely.
And working with the children is a wonderful thing, and it's just an overall great job.
Just being out in the community.
And then I want you to look left, right, left, and then over your shoulder. Make sure you cross when I tell you it's safe to cross, okay?
As a crossing guard or crossing guard trainer, you play a vital role in ensuring Florida's children have a safe journey to and from school. In fact, protecting our students from potential traffic hazards is so critical that in 1992, Florida adopted the Ramon Turnquest Act, creating the first statewide crossing guard training program of its kind in the nation. This law, now incorporated in Section 316.75 FS, requires most local governmental entities that administer school crossing guard programs to train their guards according to Florida School Crossing Guard Training Guidelines, developed by the Florida Department of Transportation, or FDOT.
Today it remains one of our country's leading crossing guard training programs, and we are all continuously working to make it better.
By participating in this video training, you are a key part of that process. Remember, the safety of our children is our first and most important concern. The Florida School Crossing Guard Training Program was created to establish a uniform system of educating, training, and certifying school crossing guard trainers according to the Florida School Crossing Guard Training Guidelines. These trainers are then qualified to educate and train local school crossing guards according to the guidelines. These training procedures promote consistent and effective operation of guarded school crossings. The crossing guard's primary job is to create a gap in traffic so that children can cross safely, to educate students about the proper ways to safely cross the street,
And to protect students from injury by assisting them while they cross.
As experienced road users, we sometimes forget just how complex navigating an infrastructure designed for adults and for motorists can be. It's important to understand that children are especially vulnerable road users. They have only partially acquired the knowledge, skills, and abilities to enable them to recognize traffic risks and make safe choices. Additionally, like the rest of us, children are easily distracted by electronic devices such as phones. Children are especially vulnerable because they lack the experience and decision-making abilities of adults. As a result, they tend to make risky choices when crossing streets. They often lack the ability to accurately assess gaps in traffic and vehicle speeds, and tend to see running across the street as a reasonable option.
Children can be impulsive in traffic and might assume that if one car stops, it's safe to cross.
Additionally, children have physical limitations, such as height, and limited peripheral vision and ability to locate relevant sound sources. By understanding these limitations and by correcting potentially dangerous behavior, guards will help students to cross safely and develop the lifelong skills they will need to be safe pedestrians. The uniform elements and equipment required of crossing guards are designed to increase visibility and safety. As a bonus, they promote an image of presence and authority in the eyes of students and motorists. Although uniform and equipment items may vary by agency, these three elements are mandatory. A high visibility retroreflective outer garment that is labeled as ANSI 107-2004, standard performance for Class 2 or higher risk exposure, Section 7D.04 MUTCD. The apparel background material shall be either fluorescent yellow-green or fluorescent orange-red. The retroreflective material shall be orange, yellow, white, silver, yellow-green, or a fluorescent version of these colors. An octagonal retroreflective stop paddle, at least 18 inches by 18 inches, having a red background and white border, displaying the word stop in uppercase white letters at least 6 inches high on both sides, and retroreflectorized, Section 7D.05 MUTCD. Remember, the retroreflective garment and octagonal stop paddle must comply with MUTCD standards. And a whistle, approved by the appropriate agency. According to the guidelines, a guard shall be equipped with a whistle. If agency policy permits, guards trained with such may use an agency-approved electronic whistle. However, guards shall be equipped with a traditional whistle on their person, accessible at all times. Wearing a hat or visor gives a guard a more official appearance, enhances visibility, and protects the head from UV radiation. When necessary, a windbreaker, jacket, or other rain gear can be worn. For safety, these items must either meet the MUTCD reflectivity requirements or be worn under the reflective vest. Guards shall not use an umbrella or other non-agency issued items such as tents, standing umbrellas, or temporary structures that would interfere with their ability to perform proper crossing procedures. Crossing guards should also wear orange or yellow-green gloves.
Agencies may dictate policy on gloves and other non-mandatory uniform requirements.
Thank you.
It is mandatory that all guards have their required uniform and equipment while on duty, and that all items are clean and in good working order.
A guard must remain standing while on duty. The guidelines state that guards shall not sit while on duty.
Sitting down somewhere on the roadside could reduce an approaching driver's peripheral view of the guard and suggest to drivers and arriving children that the guard is less than fully prepared to conduct crossings. The visible presence of an alert standing guard helps deter unsafe behavior and maintain orderly crossings. While on duty, a guard shall not eat, smoke, vape, or use tobacco products. A guard shall not consume beverages, except for water, while on duty. While in uniform, a guard shall not patronize liquor establishments. A guard shall not use foul language while on duty. A guard shall not use any electronic devices, Bluetooth devices, wear headphones, nor read while on duty. Any cellular mobile communication device may be used only in an emergency and never while crossing children.
Now let's hear about the basic techniques used to conduct school crossings.
At an intersection, traffic can approach a crosswalk from various directions. To gauge whether approaching traffic will have time to see you in the crosswalk and yield, use the following traffic search procedure for crossing a street and coach students to follow the same procedure.
At the curb or edge of the road, stand and face the roadway.
Search to the left and search to the right for traffic approaching from either direction.
If you are at an intersection, search for all traffic that might cross your path. If the gap seems adequate, before proceeding, make a final search. Continue to scan the approaches for moving vehicles.
As a crossing guard, you must know the appropriate signals to use to communicate with drivers. These signals are to alert drivers of their duty to stop for crosswalk users and are never for purposes of directing traffic. According to the MUTCD and the Florida School Crossing Guard Training Guidelines, adult crossing guards shall not direct traffic in the usual law enforcement regulatory senses. They shall stand in the roadway to indicate that pedestrians are about to use or are using the crosswalk and that all vehicular traffic must stop.
Remember, while in the roadway, never make any hand or head movement that might be interpreted by a driver as a signal to proceed. When you have taken position and are ready to cross the students, verbally and without gestures, instruct them to make their traffic searches and begin to cross.
One of the tools is your whistle, and it is mandatory for the job. The whistle is a warning device for motorists. The whistle shall be ready when stepping into the crosswalk. The guard shall initiate one long blast on the whistle when stepping off the curb. To make the hand signal for traffic to stop, look directly at the nearest driver to be alerted and point at the driver with an extended arm and 2 fingers or a flat hand. Continue to watch the driver and hold your arm extended parallel to the ground. Raise your palm upward, facing the driver. If the driver disregards the hand signal, blow one long blast on the whistle. If a driver fails to stop in response to a hand signal or the display of a stop paddle, the response is to again initiate one long blast on the whistle to warn the driver while looking directly at the driver and continuing to display the stop paddle or hand signal towards the driver with extended arm.
Remember though, as the MUTCD cautions in regard to warning signs, excessive use can result in reduced effectiveness. Another tool is the stop paddle. It is one of your most important tools and is mandatory. When held and used properly, it visually alerts drivers of your presence.
Did you know that a stop paddle, the R1-1, is an official traffic control device? Florida Statute Section 316.074 states, "The driver of any vehicle shall obey the instructions of any official traffic control device applicable thereto, placed in accordance with the provisions of this chapter, unless otherwise directed by a police officer, subject to the exceptions granted the driver of an authorized emergency vehicle in this chapter."
The stop paddle shall lead you into the crosswalk. With the leading arm, raise the stop paddle at least shoulder high. At an intersection, this will be the arm that is farthest from the intersection when you are at the curb facing the crosswalk.
Hold the stop paddle at least shoulder high so both sides are displayed to approaching traffic. Your body should not block either view of the paddle. The two faces of the paddle should remain continuously visible to traffic approaching on the respective sides. The guard shall continually scan. The stop paddle should be kept raised at all times while the guard is in the roadway. A guard shall not switch the stop paddle from one hand to the other or wave it about while in the roadway. Now that we have explained basic crossing techniques and signaling, let's move on to the 8-step procedure for conducting school crossings.
Hey, good morning, boys and girls. We're going to go over some safety rules before you step out into the street.
The 8-step crossing procedure begins with step 1, curbside assembly. Stand on the curb or behind the edge of the roadway on the side of the street where children approach. Keep children behind the stand back line or, if none, 3 feet or more from the curb or roadway edge.
I want you to look left, right, left, and over your shoulder.
Instruct the students so they will understand what they need to do to cross safely. Remember, a crossing guard shall actively reinforce safe street crossing practices, coaching students to search for traffic before crossing. Instruct them to look left, right, left for any approaching vehicle, and when at a corner, to look over their shoulder for possible turning traffic. Students are to stand away from the curb until you verbally tell them to search for traffic, cross if clear, and keep searching. Look to see if there are any students running to catch up to the group, and also ask students on bicycles, skateboards, or scooters to dismount. Students are to walk, not run, while crossing the street.
According to Florida statute, a bicycle rider or passenger who is under 16 years of age must wear a bicycle helmet that is properly fitted and fastened securely upon the rider or passenger's head by a strap that meets federal safety standard for bicycle helmets.
The second step is to select an opportune time to step into the crosswalk. Search both approaches for a sufficient gap in traffic before entering the crosswalk. For most conditions, pick a gap of at least 150 feet.
Before you step out into the street and off the curb, you need to wait until I give you the okay.
Remind students to wait for your verbal direction before starting to cross and to not walk into the street until you have given the verbal direction to do so. The third step is to enter the crosswalk, stopping near-side traffic with the raised stop paddle shoulder high, preceding or leading you to the middle of the roadway and opposite arm raised to approaching traffic. The whistle shall be ready to use. The guard shall initiate one long blast on the whistle when stepping into the crosswalk and off the curb. Ensure you are seen before entering roadway. Make eye contact. The fourth step is to stop far-side traffic. Walking in the crosswalk as you approach the middle of the roadway, check to ensure the stop paddle is visible to all oncoming traffic, including any turning traffic. The fifth step is to take position, facing the intersection in or at the edge of the crosswalk, with back to crosswalk, continuing to display the stop paddle to both approaches. Make a final check to ensure all traffic on crosswalk approaches has stopped. The sixth step is to initiate the crossing. Turn your head toward the waiting children. Make eye contact. Use only verbal instructions to tell the students search and cross when the way is clear. If a student steps into the crosswalk without searching for traffic, remind them to look left, right, left again, and over their shoulder for possible turning traffic. Remember, use words with students. Do not use hand signals because drivers may interpret your hand signals as an indication for them to move. The seventh step is to maintain your position. As children cross behind you, do not allow any driver to enter the crosswalk before the last child in the group has reached the opposite curb or roadway edge and you have completed step 8. The eighth and final step is to return to the starting curb or roadway edge. Continue to scan and remain alert for traffic with both arms extended, displaying the raised stop paddle. Keep hand and paddle extended toward immediate vehicular threat as you walk back to your initial position on curb. Lower hand and stop paddle to allow traffic to resume. Do not motion to drivers.
Remember, the crossing guard should be the first one in the crosswalk and the last one out.
Now, we will explain the procedure differences for other types of crosswalks. The procedure for crossing an unsignalized mid-block crosswalk is similar to that of an unsignalized intersection. Take position in the middle of the street, just outside the crosswalk on the side closest to the approach, with the greater apparent risk of traffic conflict. Face that approach and continue to display the stop paddle to both approaches. Make a final check that traffic on both approaches has stopped. When determining which way to face, consider which lane has more traffic volume or higher typical speeds. You can always check with your supervisor to find the right place to stand at your crossing. The procedure for crossing a signalized intersection crosswalk is similar to that of an unsignalized intersection.
And then I want you to look left, right, left, and then over your shoulder. Make sure you cross when I tell you it's safe to cross, okay?
The exception here is that step 2, select an opportune time, is replaced with wait for walk indication. As students assemble, press the pedestrian push button, if needed, to actuate a phase for pedestrian crossing. Remind students to wait for your verbal signal before starting to cross. When a fresh walking person symbol or walk message is displayed, or when the appropriate green is illuminated, if there is no pedestrian signal, make a final search for traffic before entering the crosswalk. All vehicles must remain stopped until all pedestrians have finished their crossing, even if the signal has changed. If the signal changes before the last student has reached the opposite curb, those students who have started their crossing should continue, by walking, not running, across the street. Do not allow a student to start crossing at this time. At an unsignalized or signalized crosswalk that crosses 4 or more lanes, 2 guards are assigned so that each can handle one side of the highway. The guard for the side in which students approach is in charge of initiating the crossing. Thus, the responsibility of the lead guard will switch from one side of the morning to the other side in the afternoon.
It's okay to cross.
The lead guard and secondary guard enter the crosswalk at the same time. They use the appropriate procedure for an unsignalized or signalized crosswalk, proceeding only to the middle of the traffic lanes on their side while alerting traffic. More than 2 guards may be needed at an intersection of a 2 multi-lane roadway where students must cross 2 or more legs of the intersection.
Have a great evening. Thank you.
A roundabout is a one-way circular intersection without traffic signal equipment in which traffic flows around a center island that operates with yield control at the entry points and gives priority to vehicles within the roundabout. Roundabouts move traffic safely and efficiently through an intersection. For a crossing on a leg of a roundabout, the procedure for an unsignalized mid-block crosswalk can be used.
Good morning. Just a few reminders. Do not cross until I tell you it's okay to cross. And when you start to cross, you make sure you look left, right, left for any approaching vehicles, okay?
Crosswalks at a roundabout are usually located a short distance from the circulatory roadway.
Okay to cross.
So if one or more vehicles stop at the entrance to wait for an opening to enter the roundabout, pedestrians can cross behind them. A splitter island provides a median refuge so a crossing pedestrian can concentrate on one direction of traffic at a time. Crossings at locations with heavy turning movements or other challenging conditions may require adjustments to the procedures described. Let's recap and review the 8-step procedure for conducting school crossings. Whatever type of crossing you work, the steps are very similar.
Good morning, boys and girls. We're going to go over some safety rules before you step out into the street.
1. Give curbside assembly instructions. 2. Select an opportune time to cross. Search both approaches for a sufficient gap in traffic before entering the crosswalk. For most conditions, pick a gap of at least 150 feet. 3. Enter the crosswalk, stopping near side traffic. 4. Stop far side traffic. 5. Take position. 6. Initiate the crossing. 7. Maintain your position. And 8. Return to the starting curb or roadway edge. Keep hand and paddle extended toward immediate vehicular threat as you walk back to your initial position on curb. Lower hand and stop paddle to allow traffic to resume. Do not motion to drivers. Local agencies may adjust crossing procedures to fit unique roadway configurations or conditions as long as they are consistent with guideline principles and state of Florida law. Remember, the safety of students is the primary concern. Follow the guidance given in your agency training to improve the safety of the children and yourself. Now let's look at the important role crossing guards play in maintaining the safety of school zones and crossing areas. The FDOT provides specific guidelines for the placement of traffic control devices in school zones and crossings on state roads. All school zones should be inspected each year by the appropriate law enforcement agency or traffic engineering office to make sure all signs, signals, and markings are correctly placed and maintained. These yearly inspections evaluate problems such as improper timing of traffic lights, signage that is obscured or missing, and improperly marked or worn crosswalks. In addition to these inspections, school crossing guards should inspect the signs and markings near their assigned crosswalk at the beginning of each shift. Guards should be familiar with the signs and pavement markings used at and on approaches to an assigned crossing. These may include crosswalk markings, warning signs, school speed zone signs and markings, parking prohibition signs, stop signs, and stop lines.
Guards should report to the supervisors any signs of markings that seem to be missing, damaged, or otherwise in need of maintenance.
A condition that is hazardous should be reported in accordance with agency policy on hazard reporting. Examples of these include, but are not limited to, an unmanned active school crossing post, sidewalk obstruction, for example, a fallen tree limb or a motor vehicle parked on a sidewalk or a construction closure, site obstructions, including any that might be due to parked vehicles, standing water or mud in the pedestrian pathway, driver violations that threaten crossing safety, or disorderly behavior or harassment of a child.
Guards should immediately report, in accordance with the agency policy, a traffic signal malfunction, such as it does not operate in its normal mode, either flashing or going dark, at a school crossing.
An alert, assertive, and agile guard can usually prevent or avoid pedestrian crashes. Occasionally, a child may fall, for example, by tripping, or somehow be injured without being struck by any motor vehicle.
If a pedestrian is struck or falls at a crosswalk and appears to be injured, guards should be familiar with and use the procedures prescribed by their agency.
Rain, hail, thunder, lightning, and other weather conditions can reduce traffic safety at crossings. Refer to agency policy for guidance on crossing during inclement weather. The visible presence of guards crossing students in a roadway tends to improve motorist behavior, and guards also deter improper crossings by students, such as darting into the roadway. When a vehicle and a pedestrian collide, usually one or the other has made a critical mistake. Even when the motorist is at fault, a pedestrian who practices good crossing techniques may be able to anticipate conflicts and avoid injury. A key skill to mitigate crossing hazards is to recognize and pause at traffic edges. Encourage students to stop, look, and listen before you cross the street. First, use your eyes, then use your ears, and then you use your feet. Pedestrian crashes of the multiple threat type have resulted in serious injury to children at crossing locations. This happens when a motorist stops to let a pedestrian cross. The pedestrian enters the crosswalk in front of the stopped motorist, but a motorist in the adjacent lane fails to stop. The stopped vehicle obstructs the views of the pedestrian for the overtaking motorist. If the crossing pedestrian fails to scan for approaching traffic before proceeding past the stopped vehicle, a crash can occur. Here are other hazardous motorist behaviors of which school crossing guards need to be aware. Distracted driving, speeding, right turn into a crosswalk on a green light, entering the crosswalk to make a right turn on red light, making a left turn into a crosswalk on a green light, running the light, and stopping in the crosswalk. There can be hazards resulting from environmental elements. Morning darkness, fog, rain, lightning, and other conditions can create potentially dangerous situations at school crossings. For example, a roadway is most slippery during the first 10 to 15 minutes of a rainfall because oils in the pavement have not yet been washed away. This creates a scenario where vehicles and crossing pedestrians have less road traction. Motorists require more distance to stop, and their ability to see the road ahead can be reduced. Since braking distances are increased, this needs to be a consideration when making a gap assessment. Peripheral vision is often limited during rain or fog, so it is important to be extra cautious of motorists turning into the crosswalk. An electrical storm can distract motorists or disrupt the regular operation of traffic signals. Children have a greater tendency to run and not use proper skills in rainy weather, making them more susceptible to slips and falls. As always, they are to be cautioned to look and not to run. One of the most important skills that guards develop is the ability to assess motorist speed, including how it relates to a safe gap analysis when stepping into oncoming traffic. Remember, not allowing drivers ample time to stop is dangerous for students, motorists, and crossing guards. How much time drivers need to stop safely depends on the speed at which they're traveling and road conditions. The best way to develop your gap assessment skill is to learn to recognize motorist speed by how rapidly they are approaching. Speeding vehicles cannot be stopped by you, so decelerating or slowing vehicles are all you can work with. Pick a fixed object about 150 feet from your crosswalk and use that as the cutoff point for safely slowing vehicles when starting your crossing. Allow vehicles inside the 150-foot area to pass before starting your crossing. A condition you should be especially concerned with is poor visibility and slower reaction time due to morning darkness, rain, or fog. Also, remember that when streets are wet, stopping distances are increased and extra care needs to be taken with regard to gap assessment. Gap assessment can also be affected by vehicle size, speed of the oncoming vehicle, and traffic speed. Remember, a motorist's peripheral vision is often limited during wet weather. You have to be extra careful of motorists turning into the crosswalk. In rainy weather, children have a greater tendency to run and not use proper crossing skills. This means you will have to take extra care. School crossing guards must recognize that children have relatively little experience in traffic or around roadways. Because of their size, children also have physical limitations that can endanger them. By reinforcing safe crossing skills every day, you will be helping them to understand how traffic works and how they can safely interact with it. Florida school crossing guards are professionals looked up to by students. They are vital members of the school community and are a key element in keeping our school crossings safe for Florida's children.
Thank you, Florida School Crossing Guards.